Good evening. I am Sarah Warren. I'm the Senior Executive Director for Strategy for Portland Public Schools. And I'm joined by several members of our board and staff here who I will ask to introduce themselves in just a second. But just to make sure everyone's in the right place, this is a public engagement session about potential revisions to policy JFCK and the related rules, JFCKR, which is our policy related to cell phones and other electronic devices. We are very happy to have folks here this evening. We're really looking forward to getting some input. And before I dive into the content, I'm going to ask each of the other members of the panel here to speak. Sarah Lentz, Chair Lentz, would you mind introducing yourself first?
Yeah, happy to. My name is Sarah Lentz, pronouns are she, hers. I'm chair of the board and also an at-large member. And I can pass to Julie.
Okay, well, I'm Julianne Opperman, and I am District 3 representative on the board.
Grace, do you want to go ahead? I think that
Maya's still here.
Maya's still there? Okay. Oh, I couldn't see everybody. Okay, Maya, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I'm Maya Lena. I'm an at-large member of the school board.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Grace Valenzuela. I'm the Executive Director for Communications, Family, and Community Partnership.
Great. All right. So we've got some slides here just to help kind of frame the conversation, but really the most important part of this is to make sure that we're getting feedback from people. So after I do a little bit of brief framing, we'll open it up for conversation. And just to forewarn you, we will also be sharing a link to the draft of the revised policy. And so you'll want to have a way to look at that on your screen. Okay. So just a quick...
Sarah, I just want to make sure to let you know that the link is already posted on the chat.
Oh, great. So if folks, can others see that now?
Not yet.
We have to probably resend.
Yes, thank you, Grace.
Okay. Great. So just as a little bit of background on where we've come from and where we're heading. So the board curriculum and policy committee voted on April 15th to pass a proposed revised version of policy JFCK to the full board for the board's consideration and potential vote. I should say that April 15th was not in any way the start of this conversation. This has been going on in various forums for quite a while. Much of the conversation over the past year or so really related a lot to middle schools and how we would enforce this policy, the existing policy at the middle school level. And then some conversations opened up more and more around what's happening at the high school level and just generally concerns around the impact of cell phones and other electronic devices on teaching and learning and on student health and well-being. And so the Curriculum and Policy Committee had prior conversations around this topic and ultimately asked us as staff to go back and work with our attorneys to come up with some proposed new language that moved in the direction that they were envisioning, which was more towards a complete ban during the school day. So that is the language that is in the revised version that you will see here. That version of the policy, the proposed revisions, will go to the full board on May 20th. For the first read, and then June 10th is when we anticipate the board ultimately voting on the proposed revisions. As usual, there are opportunities for public comment at board meetings, so that would be the case at both of those meetings as well. And we're doing lots of engagement over the coming few weeks with students, staff, and members of the community, families. So the district staff, at the same time that we're looking at the policy and engaging people around this topic. We're continuously taking people's input, doing added research. We'll be visiting another school soon in Bath to see how they're doing this kind of work. And based on what we hear from the board, from our community, and what we're learning as we go, we will also be updating rules that would accompany this revised policy if the board does indeed vote to move that forward. So both of these things are happening in parallel. So right now, the policy that exists is essentially what we would call casually off and away. So it's essentially a policy that says that students' cell phones should, for the most part, not be with them while they're in school and in class. The reality is that that's not always happening. But technically speaking, particularly at the elementary and middle school level, students are not currently supposed to have their phones with them during class. There are a few more exceptions in the current policy for high school, students being allowed to use the phones during lunch and breaks. But the new policy proposal would actually have students, first of all, encouraging students not to bring cell phones or electronic devices to school if they aren't really needed, which is a whole other topic of conversation. We realize that many, people have various reasons why they want students, and why students themselves would like to have a cell phone or another electronic device on them when they go to and from school. But the general idea here would be, if you don't really need it, then don't bring it. There's another component to this, which is if you do bring it, then the policy would require the student to hand over the device, and that would then be stored throughout the day by the school, by administrators. So the policy, the current language in the proposed revision is not just cell phones themselves, but all other types of personal electronic devices, such as smartwatches and tablets and earbuds. Gaming devices, which some students do apparently bring to school. The policy also notes that there would be very limited exceptions to this rule, to the all-day ban, but there would be some exceptions, and those would be things like health-related needs. One thing that's come up is students who may have their phone connected to an insulin pump. Obviously, that would be a fairly important type of exception to make. And the rules would lay out those details. Other parts of the policy are really not new. They may look a little different or be in a different spot on the page, but you'll see, for example, there's a component about students being able to use cell phones during before, after school, or weekend programming with the permission of the person who's running the program. That language is still consistent in there. There's also some very sort of legalistic sounding language around search and seizure, which also connects back to our other policy that's specific to search and seizure. So that is language that's standard and that has not been changed. It stays in there. So the rules, we're not going to dig into those and look at the latest draft here in detail. I will show you the draft of the policy, but just so you have a sense of the types of things that will go into the rules. So it will get more detailed than the policy would be. So the policy is the overarching frame. The rules get down to more specifics around procedures and guidance as to how schools will actually implement the policy. So the board votes on policy, and then it's the responsibility of staff at the district and school levels to make sure that there are appropriate rules and procedures in place to be able to implement the board's policy. The board could say, if they don't like our rules and think that they don't align to the policy, could reject them and tell us to go back and redo them. But in general, what we're trying to stay focused on right now, knowing that this would be a relatively significant change, and there would be a lot of work to do to make sure that we're implementing it well and communicating well with students and staff and families. So we're trying to make sure that we're keeping the development of the rules going in parallel to the development of the policy, so that if the board does adopt a revised policy, we would have rules ready to go almost immediately after the policy gets passed. So the rules would look at things like how cell phones will be collected and redistributed at school if students bring them to school. And again, not just cell phones, but other types of devices. Questions have come up around what happens if students, particularly at a couple of our high schools, if they're going off campus for open lunch, would they be able to take their phones with them? So the rules would address that and how that would happen. Or they may be going off site for another program. For example, if they're going to PATS to participate in the CTE program there, or some other program that's outside of their own school building, the rules would need to identify what happens in those types of circumstances. How devices will be managed during out-of-school time programming. Again, the current version of the policy allows for that use, but we would probably be putting a little more detail to the how of that in and the procedures around it in the rules. It would go into more detail around what exceptions the administrators might consider and what the process would be for a student to request that kind of exception, and how the administrators would consider that and provide feedback to the student. Another important piece of this is progressive discipline. What are the types of consequences that would be reasonable and allowable if students were repeatedly not following the rules? I think part of the desire here is to make sure there's some degree of consistency in how this gets implemented across schools. And that would be one area where we would want to make sure there was some degree of consistency. Expectations for communicating the rules, and for doing some education around the use of technology, some of the pros and cons, the risks and opportunities. We would really be communicating this in as much as possible as soon as we know that the policy has changed. And we would be doing that both right at the end of this school year and as we head into the new school year, making sure that folks are really well aware of any changes that are put into effect, and prepared to be able to implement that and follow the rules starting in the new school year. And then procedures for students and families to be able to communicate if there's critical and time-sensitive information. That is something that has come up many times within the committee, in conversations with students and staff and others, making sure that families have a way to be able to communicate if they need to get information to their student, or if their student needs to get information to the family. This is something that a lot of us grew up in a different time when this wasn't even an option. There just was a way for the family to call through the school office and get something to their student if needed. But certainly this would be a change in practice and a little bit of shift in culture, to not have students with their cell phones all the time and readily accessible to their parents pretty much at all times. So that would be addressed in the rules as well. This slide is included here in part because I think in a conversation with students yesterday, I realized that we maybe aren't always being clear about why we're even going down this path. And so it seemed like it might be worth just sort of revisiting, and board members may want to chime in here because I don't want to speak on your behalf. But I think that, what I've been hearing as some of the reasons why both board members and community members and staff have been interested in pursuing this possible revision have to do with a number of things, including a growing body of research that points to some fairly concerning and negative social, emotional, mental health effects, the concern around students being addicted to devices, and that not being helpful, particularly given that young people's prefrontal cortex is still developing. And so it's a particularly bad time in life to have this kind of addictive pattern going on as the brain is developing. We've had, I would say, based on my time in Portland Public Schools, pretty significantly increased momentum around this conversation, a lot more sort of energy around this coming from a number of community members, families, and staff in particular. And then, when we're hearing from people who are in classrooms, both students and educators, hearing that they really are disrupting teaching and learning in a lot of situations, not necessarily every day in every classroom, but that it is an issue in a number of classrooms, and that it is a burden for a lot of our teachers to have to manage this and to try to be the ones to enforce the current policy and take the phones away or ensure they're in their classroom cell phone hotels or whatever the procedure is, and that it's an inconsistent implementation of the current policy. So students are not experiencing the rules the same way in different classrooms. And then there is just generally growing momentum nationally and here in Maine around limitations on cell phones. New York State was the latest last week to create a statewide ban. I think that's the 8th state now that has come up with legislation like that. There's also legislation in Augusta that the legislature has in front of them to potentially do the same thing. So when we are talking with folks in other districts who have done these types of things and made these changes, we're hearing and reading about some pretty significant improvements in what's going on in classrooms and outside of classrooms. So not only improved engagement in class, but also more social interaction among students. Like at lunchtime, people have talked about, going from a silent cafeteria or lunchroom where students are just all on their cell phones or devices to a room where it's loud and bustling and students are engaging with one another. And then another thing we've been hearing, which is fascinating to me, is that a lot more students in the schools where the cell phones have been banned are going to visit the nurse and the health suite, which I gather is because rather than calling out to their family to talk about something or spending their time on their cell phone doing other things, they're taking the time to go and get their healthcare needs addressed in the health suite. So kind of an interesting and, for me, unanticipated result. Okay. So now to dive into, let me actually just pause here for a second and see if there are members of the board in particular who would like to add anything else about how we got to where we are now and why you're, why you feel like the committee has made the proposal to move this to the board.
Julianne, do you want to go first?
Certainly. I am happy that the committee has brought this to the board. I was taught for 40 years, and anything that interferes with the ability of a teacher and student to communicate and develop a learning relationship prevents a positive experience in the class. And I think that's one of the initial reasons for my thinking about this, is just truly thinking about the psychology of learning. And then I began to read, and all of the piles of information that was out there showing that it's, again, a mental health problem. Interestingly, I will say that if you consider all the information that one's getting, or all the time that one is on any kind of screens, computer, phone, television, whatever, it is okay for 1 hour per day. So I just want to say that these things are not evil, but that in fact that they have they immediately after about an hour or so start to decrease the mental capabilities of the individual. So that's what I'd say. Sarah, anything you'd like to offer?
Yeah, I would just add, we did update this policy last spring that we updated this policy to be off and away. And it was really then that we started to hear from teachers that off and away just wasn't enough, and that really they needed a stricter policy. And that, was happening at the same time that there was just more rollouts across the state and further research that was coming out. So that is, we're kind of the combination of things that were happening that really asked us to look at this policy again.
Great. And Member Lena, anything else you wanted to add? Okay, great. So I want to just give everybody a few minutes to read the proposed policy revision. Some people have probably seen it already, but Grace or Colby, can we guide people to that?
Yes, that link is in the chat.
Can everybody on the call see the chat?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, and if anyone has any issues with finding the link, just let us know. We will just take, I'd say, it's 6:22. I'm going to give us until 6:26 or 7 to just let people read through the policy. If you have questions that are coming up as you read, feel free to put them. Are we using chat or Q&A feature?
Q&A. We've already had questions from them.
You can see. Okay, I can't see the questions. In fact, are there questions that I should be pausing and we should address now?
Well, the original question was a comment from Stephanie saying she's grateful for the initiative and it would be great to borrow from the best practices so we don't reinvent the wheel, which is, I explained what we're trying to do.
Yeah. Great.
Excuse me.
All right. So I'm going to give people about 4 minutes to sort of skim through it. I'd say the first 3 sections are the most important to consider. So I'm just going to pause here for a minute and let people read a little bit. Okay. I think we'll go ahead and just open it up now. We don't have that big a group, so I think we're just going to stay as a larger group. Also, I'm not that confident in our ability to do breakouts. I don't want to lose anyone. So I think there are kind of different questions that come to mind, and sometimes when we're looking at the policy, a lot of what comes up are actually questions about what the rules should be. And that's okay. It's really both. We want to hear people's input on the current proposed wording of the policy itself. I think that would be helpful for the board. But it's also extremely important that we get people's input on the things that are going to go into the rules, which are, more detailed thinking around what types of exceptions we should be making, how we're actually going to manage this. Now, I will say we're doing lots of research right now and we're visiting other districts and whatnot. So I think we're getting a better handle on how the logistics of collecting and giving back cell phones can work.
Sarah, a part of the interview, but someone said they were unable to get chat was disabled. I don't know if that needs...
We just posted it again.
Okay,
Maybe
thank you.
The attendee was
if there's a problem, say it again. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, Sarah.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, and then the other thing I actually should have said at the beginning is that we posted information both on our website and through the community newsletter, the most recent one, which is on the website. So you can get to all of this information around the policy and the rules that way. And then also in board docs on our website, you can get to not only the actual documents that were looked at by the committee, but you can, if you really want to, go to YouTube and watch a replay of the committee meeting from April. So anyway, so going back to the discussion, everything is fair game, right? We want to hear people's thoughts, questions, suggestions, both about the policy and about the details of how you would like to see it implemented and what should go into the rules. So with that, I'm going to, Member Lena, go ahead.
Thanks. I have a point of clarification when we're talking about getting feedback for the rules. Are we looking for general feedback for the whole policy, or, I mean, for the rules for the policy, or would this be by grade band? So high school specific, middle school specific, elementary specific? Because what I'm understanding is that the rules will be specific, not just by grade band, but by school. So Portland High School may have different rules than Deering High School. Can you clarify that?
It's a good question. So in the first draft of the updated rules that we did, it was leaving a lot of latitude for each school to figure out its own process for collecting and storing phones, and for creating the process for applying for exceptions and making decisions around exceptions. But I think the feedback that we've gotten so far since that committee meeting is that pretty much universally, the folks who've weighed in have said they feel like we really need more consistency in how these procedures work across schools. The question about grade bands is a really good one, and I think one that would be really good to get folks' input on here. When we did the most recent version of the draft rules, it sort of seemed like, well, at the elementary and middle school levels, there's not that much that differs. There may be differences in the way that we collect and store phones and devices because there aren't that many at the elementary school level. So I can imagine us adopting maybe a somewhat more sophisticated approach at the middle and high school levels where we've got a lot more devices that we're trying to potentially, take in and manage. So that I could see differing. The place where there's probably the most variation is likely to be at the high school level, particularly with students who leave campus during the day and come back later, students who may have other sort of adult considerations that, don't exist as much at the lower grades. So there could be a high school student that has children themselves, for example, or, other types of life circumstances, like they have jobs. So I do think that it's worth people, thinking about and weighing in on any differences they think should be made in the rules for the different grade bands. The policy itself at the moment, the way it's written, is universal. It doesn't differentiate.
I just want... Sarah?
Sorry, am I audible at the moment? This is Will Kessler.
Yes. Go ahead, Will.
Okay, wonderful. So chiming in as a soon-to-be Portland High School parent, and we also have somebody who's a teacher over at East End School in the family. And so first of all, just thank you very much for keeping the ball moving forward. I kind of, on a general scale, like unflinchingly support the idea of no cell phones in schools at all levels. I think it's well overdue. I wanted to offer some specific thoughts on the comment a moment ago about, how do the policies differ between schools? And then, so our kid is probably going to be at Portland High School next year, and understanding that they, from time to time, step off campus for their lunch periods. And my intuitive feeling about that is, if it's a lunch period, that's a social time for the students, and there's really still no good reason for them to be coming and getting their device so they can walk around with it for 45 minutes or an hour, downtown. I just don't see a great reason for that. I think a second thought, and then I'll wrap it up. There's probably a really good template for this type of thing, which is an early dismissal release form, which I think every school probably has. And, the main office gets the parent's permission for a student to basically leave school to go do something other than school. And so in that case, it seems like, well, for those scenarios, a student would be able to, jailbreak their cell phone basically, and take it out for the day because they're going somewhere that's, not a study hall or an off-campus lunch for an hour. Anyway, so thank you again. Really love to see this initiative take hold in a way that's consequential.
Thank you, Will. Much appreciated. Grace, I'm going to move to you in a second, but I just wanted to share one thing, Will, about the question about students leaving campus. I mean, one question has come up, which I don't think we're going to handle or tackle here in this process is, should students be leaving campus for lunch? So that is a question that some people have, but that's not, what's at play here. But what I think we've heard from some students is, well, I need my phone for safety reasons when I leave the school. I need it if I'm going to ride on Metro. I'm not sure if they're getting on Metro at lunchtime, but certainly that's one reason why students want to have a phone as they come and go from school in general. And then issues like Apple Pay. If I need Apple Pay to go and buy my lunch, I need my phone for that. So just not coming down in one direction or the other, but just sharing what we've heard from some of the students around why they want their phones at that time. Go ahead, Grace.
I just want to remind people that the chat is disabled from the audience end. So we can post information for you, but you cannot respond there. If you want any response, you can put your comments or questions on the Q&A.
Great, thank you. And I'm going to ask folks to help me with Q&A because I can't see it right now. But Erica, go ahead.
Hi, thanks. So I had a handful of just comments. I, by the way, teach at Portland High School, and I live in Portland, and I'm the parent of a 20-year-old and an 18-year-old who have recently graduated from high school. So that's sort of, where my perspective is coming from. I think in a perfect world, we would all love to ban cell phones, no doubt about it, at least during the school day. And I'm not 100% opposed to this policy, but I am very concerned about timing and a few logistics. So I just wanted to share a few thoughts about that. I think, one, we aren't really acknowledging what some of the real positives are that come from cell phone use during school. And again, and I'm just thinking things like in our digital photography class, like that art class uses cell phones, as part of the curriculum. So like, are we going to spend money to buy digital cameras for all the students? Because we've got, 150 kids signed up for that class next year, as an example. Many new Mainers use their phones for translations throughout the day and communicating with teachers because it's just much simpler than trying to use the Chromebook. It's very clunky. And we also use occasionally, cell phones for taking pictures for really cool school projects or documenting things that they've done. So just a thought there that there's another exception we'd have to think about. Another thing, I just feel like timing is really tough here. A June 10th vote means that all the decision making about this would have to happen over the summer, so you wouldn't get a lot of input from staff unless you're willing to bring in teacher leader groups and pay them. And I agree, I think maybe you, Sarah, mentioned that it really should be consistent across schools, and I do think you're setting yourself up for a lot of difficulty if the different high schools have different rules, so I would definitely say that's something that has to happen. I also just think that the district's being slightly naive. And again, I don't think we can't overcome this obstacle. I just don't know that we can do it by fall, given the date of this vote. But the collection and redistribution of devices sounds like a complete logistical nightmare in school where kids are coming and going all day long for various reasons, as you know, in and out of paths, late arrival, early release, internships, you name it. And so, this to me literally sounds like a full-time job, at least at Portland High. And I think about, all the people who come in and out of the door. Someone's got to manage and distribute those phones. So that's a pretty significant cost. And then I agree, like you have some questions there about what are the appropriate consequences. And I think we're all aware that this district doesn't really have much of a stomach for strong consequences or discipline, and it's going to have to be if you want this to be successful. Otherwise, it's like vaping, right? I mean, the policy says you can't do it, but so many kids are doing it, and we're sort of left trying to manage this problem without any real solutions. So I'd really urge you to think long and hard about what consequences you feel can and will be consistently imposed when kids violate the policy. And then the final thing just to think about that I haven't seen on any of your lists is that you haven't mentioned anything about when internet goes down in school and when phones go down. And I don't know about all the schools, but that seems to happen quite frequently at Portland High. And it doesn't necessarily last a long time, although sometimes it does. And we've been told time and time again that the reason we stay open and we don't close school is because we can be safe because everyone has cell phones. So when internet goes down, currently a lot of kids use their phone for schoolwork. And we also use that for communication tools, like teachers are using it constantly throughout the day to get messages from the main office about dismissals, all these different things. It's the only way to communicate. So what would be the plan or policy when internet or phones go down if no one has access to a cell phone? So just throwing that out there, another thing to think about. And I would urge you to maybe move forward with the elementary band, maybe the middle school band, try it out there, and then move to the high schools because they just seem really, really complex and the timing is super tight. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Erica. Just scrolling through. Dr. Scallon, I wondered if, it's not to put you on the spot, I wondered if you wanted to address anything around internet and phones.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. I think to Erica's point, it 100% needs to be addressed and that we need to be able to have a clear plan around how that is tackled. There is work that's being done around just the overall infrastructure so that it doesn't happen. And that I think that we haven't operated with the level of urgency and need to fully have it tackled and a full solution to it because of the fact that folks have had cell phones. So I think Erica's point's right. And we just recently hired a new director of IT and are hiring a assistant director for engineering to tackle this. So it's not an ongoing issue. And I do think we have some solutions that make it so that it is not an ongoing issue. And I will just say that at least by our count, the overall time that it's gone down where phones are down for any extended period of time has been 4 times this year. It's 4 times too many. But that is part of what needs to be addressed to have this be successful.
Great, thank you.
Hey, I just wanted to jump back in for half a second and kind of share 2 thoughts that come, and this is along the lines of the Japanese word for crisis is also opportunity. So we kind of, as adults, know that there's a huge upside to decreasing screen time and promoting focus in our schools, socio-economic, socio-emotional as well. But here's an example. The previous commenter mentioned, not being able to use your phone to pay for a sandwich or a coffee, when leaving school. Well, the upside of that is maybe kids carry cash and do a little bit more math on the fly, like in the middle of their school day. So not being tethered to a device in order to pay everything electronically that's money management is a thing, and being able to do that. As far as the phone line issue, that also had occurred to me, and I didn't want to bring it up, but since it came up, yeah, I mean, the benefit here is if we're dialing the cell phones way back and towards the ban, that provides some urgency for us to get on our contractors and ask, why hasn't the system been hardened, to commercial grade for, all our elementary, middle, and high schools, so we can rely on our phone lines, unless the grid goes up. That's another thing. But anyway, so wanted to just add those two.
Great. Thanks, Will. I'm not seeing other hands right now. Are there things popping up in the Q&A that I can't see right now that someone wants to read out? Nope.
No, they aren't. Not so. Just a couple of logistical things. There were some comments, actually quite extended comments, on if you'd like to read them.
I think Julie and I have been responding to folks that have been putting in questions, and I'm also, just for everybody that's here, just know that I'm recording all the questions and the points that get brought up to share with both the board and the administrative team, just to make sure that we can answer all of those. I won't do it in a way that's attached to anyone's name, though. It'll be confidential, but all the points that you're bringing up are being recorded.
Great, thank you.
I mean, there have been comments, logistical comments, and also the comments about who would actually be working with the students to ensure that they are complying. The comment about how to deal with the coming and going is being considered in a couple different ways. Partially with perhaps the packages, the younger, some kind of way of the student not having access to the phone, but but having it on their person or in their bag. Those are thoughts. But I think an important thing to think about with, how we organize our courses and translations. There are other ways than a cell phone to do this. There are devices that are not internet connection type devices that one can use for translation. So I think there are ways. I'm looking forward to, but are those practical ways? Those are certainly the things we have to look at.
I can maybe just say a little bit more about, what we're learning as we look at what other schools are doing. In terms of the device collection and storage, it really ranges pretty dramatically from very rudimentary systems where folks have milk crate type boxes or filing boxes with manila envelopes, and then envelopes have the students' names on them, and the students come in the morning and they plunk the phone or the device into that envelope, and they get it back again at the end of the day. So that's kind of on the basic end. There are places that are using what folks refer to as cell phone hotels, which are kind of more like a shelving system, and some of our schools already have those at the classroom level. There are Member Opperman just referred to Yonder, which is a company that creates these sort of fancy pouches, and there's a magnet system so that you have to have this magnet, which would be held onto by administrators in order to lock and unlock the bag. So students would put their devices into the bag as they come into school, and then it would get locked, and they would be able to unlock it when they leave school with the help of an administrator. So that's kind of on the high end. And if we look at something like Yonder, we're talking to do that for all of our middle and high school students would probably be well over $100,000. So pretty significant. The cheaper models, not as sophisticated, but a lot more cost effective. There's another pouch system that we've gotten a quote on that's a lot cheaper than Yonder. We don't know as much about that one yet, but we'll be learning more. So we're trying to explore all different types of options. Our colleagues up in Bath at Morse High School are using Yonder. They were able to purchase those pouches with ESSER, or the federal COVID funding. And then they're putting a small amount in their budget each year to, upgrade and add where they need to. We don't have that kind of budget line for this at this stage. So I think we're going to have to be a little bit more creative and more fiscally cautious as we think through the options.
Sorry, Sarah, could you clarify on that last point? Is the $100,000 price tag, is that an annual operating expense for the fee?
No.
Of the bags?
No, it would be an upfront cost of probably over $120,000 is what I kind of back of the napkin figured out based on what Yonder had shared with us. So it would be a significant upfront cost, and then there would be smaller costs each year to replace bags or to, they last for several years, but you would have to replace some bags periodically. So it's a one-time cost initially, but it's not a one-time cost forever.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Member Lena.
Thanks. I know you've mentioned the Morse High School in Bath a few times, but I know that this is picking up nationally. Have you looked into schools in California or wherever this is happening in terms of how many years have they been doing this? What are the procedures? How is it working? That way we really don't have to reinvent the wheel. So what examples do you have, and can you share those?
There are draft procedures and stories from all over the place, honestly. I don't have them all at my fingertips right now. And there are organizations that are really specializing in this work. So Jonathan Haidt, who wrote the book about anxious generation, anxious students, actually has sort of like a spin-off organization that is supporting school districts in doing this work. There are videos available online where you can hear from other districts and schools. I just watched one yesterday that was a mix of someone from a relatively large high school in Ohio and another smaller school in Vermont. And they were just sharing some of their experiences and procedures, and they were both advocating the less expensive approach to doing this because it's just a lot more feasible and sustainable for a lot of school systems. In terms of people who've been doing it for a number, like many years, I haven't looked at those yet, but admittedly, I've been learning about all this fairly recently. I was not involved in this prior to the last few weeks, so I'm really coming up to speed still myself. Erica, is that a new hand or an old hand?
No, it's a new hand. Is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So I agree. I was going to ask about, I initially put my hand up to ask about the budget and the cost of this, because I do think there are costs associated with it, regardless of how you slice it. So I think that's just, again, another consideration. And I'm sounding to me like, because we haven't budgeted and it's tight, that this is probably going to fall into some sort of manual system where teachers, I'm guessing, are going to be asked to collect these phones, because there is no way an administrative team of 2 or 3 people can collect, between 800 and 1,000 phones in the morning and then redistribute them in the afternoon. So I have a number of concerns about that. I just think it doesn't really, I think we're talking about major schedule changes. Like, I don't know, I'm not 100% sure how Deering and Casco schedules work, but I'm pretty sure they jump right in with an academic class at the beginning of the day, most days. And it wouldn't really make a lot of sense for that academic teacher to collect those phones, because then that's not who students end the day with. And so I just think about, or what if a teacher has a prep period block one, but I'm supposed to collect my advisories cell phones. Like, I just think people think they're like these really simple solutions. And again, just want to remind you that this is super, super complicated. And again, I'm not opposed. I think we can work it out. I just don't think we can work it out between June 10th and August 15th, like when teachers need to know what the plan is. So I would just caution you to really think about that at the high school level, where so many kids are moving in so many different directions and teachers are moving in different directions and have wildly different schedules. It's a very, very complex place. So, thinking that we're just going to have pouches or phone hotels is a little bit naive. I would also remind you that most kids have an extra phone. I mean, we deal with this all the time already. We collect phones at the beginning of a class and, somehow a kid gets caught in the hall and, on the way to the bathroom with their phone, even though their phone's in the phone hotel. So there's that as well. And again, just something to think about. What about these kids who have multiple phones to try to, avoid or circumvent the system, because they're going to do that because they're teenagers, and that's what we love about them. They're super creative, but it is another problem to think about. So I would again maybe urge starting with just middle school, try some things out, see how it goes, learn lessons, and then move it to high school after we sort of know what works, what doesn't work, and what the problems are. Thanks.
Thanks, Erica. Member Opperman, go ahead.
Oh, yes. Oh, Erica, I hear you. I think for me, I taught high school for 40 years, and maybe we didn't have cell phones until the very end, but there was always something, and there always will be tests. And the idea of this is to devise a system which takes the responsibility away from the teachers, individual teachers, to be monitoring at every class and taking care of it. They will sneak. I believe you and all, but hopefully if they have it and it doesn't come out, there is no confrontation. I mean, if there's confrontation, that's where we need a decent set of consequences. But I have been working on this at some level for quite a long time, and my hope, and sincere hope, is that not as a hope, a design is to have something so that the teachers, before they leave in June, know what's going on. You're right, to show up and not know what's happening in, the crunch in August is insane. So that's why we're doing this. That's all the things you brought up need to be addressed and thought through, and a plan. It may not be a perfect plan. It may involve a lot of jumping through hoops of different sorts, but hopefully not for the teachers, because that is where the conflict has been. That is where the cell phone issue with learning is coming into play. And so keep thinking, keep sending other ideas, even if after this meeting, because if you think of some things, it can happen, it can work, but we don't have to wait 2 years to make it happen, is my thought. So, but yeah, please contact me with anything you.
Dr. Warren, we do have a couple of questions in the chat that I think maybe you could answer, the Q&A. There's a question about whether or not students can now reliably call their parents from the school offices or directly from classrooms when plans change, if they want to arrange after school pickup, etc.
I can't really speak to that in any kind of depth. I'm assuming that if a student doesn't have a cell phone and they need to reach their family for something urgent, that they can get support from the school on that. And I suspect it probably works a little differently at each school. But I do know that there are phones in the office. There are phones in classrooms too. I don't know that we want to create a system where we're suddenly having students making calls from lots of different parts of the school. And I think we need to simplify whatever we come up with here. And just kind of to go back to Erica's point about how complicated this is, I know that's sort of how I felt when we started looking at this, like, this is a lot. But as we talk to other folks that have actually been implementing this, the the word is sort of, yeah, you get it set up, and it can it takes a little bit longer the first several times you do it, but then people get it down and it just becomes a routine. And it, perhaps saves time in other ways, like dealing with, discipline issues from lots of phones being around and out and used in ways that are unhelpful. So it's not to say that it wouldn't be a fairly significant shift. It clearly will be. And I don't think we should sugarcoat that part of it. It's something that that will have to be very well thought through, communicated, and then, supported as people get used to it, both technically and from a cultural change point of view.
Thanks, Dr. Warren. And then there was just another question about the presence of lockers at middle schools and high schools, and if we're considering using lockers as the storage device at all.
I have heard sort of mixed feelings about using lockers because if they go into student lockers, then it's not as then students can get at them whenever they go to their lockers. So it's a little bit different than just having a full-on not on your person kind of a policy. And I've also heard some concerns about the security of phones being put in lockers, especially those that are not getting locked, which I think is more common at the middle school level. But, I think it's if people think that lockers are a good way to go, we could explore that more.
Thank you. And there's a note in the Q&A that PHS students don't use their lockers because of where they're located. So yeah, I think we'd have to figure out if that makes sense. And then just one other one. What could this look like for parents who want to have direct access to their child or in the age of some terrifying emergencies that could affect schools, and even the lesser emergencies like reaching a child waiting for a late bus or unsure if they should be standing curbside, or changes to logistics? What can be said for those parents, or access to a child with a GAB watch, or unsure if school is equipped to receive heightened number of calls to contact the child?
So one thing I will say about emergencies is I understand that instinct and that feeling of wanting to be able to immediately communicate. The truth is that from a safety point of view, it's actually not to anybody's advantage if there are calls coming and going from the school in large numbers in the middle of an emergency. It adds to noise, confusion, people not paying attention to the instructions that they're being given by school leaders, educators, authorities coming in. And a large scale could potentially even create issues with the cell phone communications and jamming up the system, which is definitely not something we would want in the middle of an emergency. We don't, if there is a significant emergency, the district communicates out to families of that school and provides instructions as to what families should be doing. And we don't want families rushing to a school when there's some kind of issue going on, because that actually just hampers emergency response efforts. So in the event of an emergency, there will be communications and families will be told if they need to pick up their students and where. Do offices have the capacity to handle all kinds of communications that families might want to, engage in with their students? No, probably not at the volume that it happens right now, I'm guessing. But I do think that that's partly where there will probably need to be some culture shift, right? Around, how important is it really? That is this truly a critical and urgent thing? If it's about something like where you're standing on the curb to pick up, to get picked up by your parent, well, at that point you would have your cell phone back again because you'd be, at the end of the school day and leaving. So I'm not saying that there won't be changes and shifts for people, and that it might not be difficult for especially some families who are really accustomed to having a lot of contact with their students during the day. It would be a change, but I think in some ways might be helpful to not have quite as much communication going on, and just let students be present at school and present in class.
Thanks, Dr. Warren. It also looks like we have a question, and I see you, Board Member Upperman, but we have a question from Carol, and then I believe Will Kessler, and maybe Dr. Ahmed somewhere I saw. So Carol, if you want to come off of mute, you're more than welcome to speak. Oh, Carol, are you there? Okay, let's go up to Will, and then we'll come back to Carol to see if she's there.
Yeah,
go ahead, Will.
Hey, thanks, Sarah. So I would like to stay on the hard stuff, and for the time being, I hear a phased rollout possibility. So for the year 2025, 26, maybe starting with elementary or the middle, and then eventually getting to the high schools. I think that kind of neglects the fact that the most impactful and the most positive effect of a cell phone policy, across the schools would be at the high school level, because that's where most of them are showing up and disrupting class and making it hard for the teachers to. So anyway, just kind of staying on the difficult question for the moment, and also hearing a lot of really interesting cases from, I think, parents and teachers where for A, B, or C, those are valid reasons to have a device for part of the school day. I'm just going to kind of paint a picture here. What if, the rollout was a hard rollout for elementary and middle, and then it was a soft rollout for the high schools. And by that, I mean, like, the school board puts it out there with a framework of, here's the new rule, here's the new policy. Here is a system or a device that's the school can buy for each of the high schools, and here's what it looks like. Here are a list of valid exemptions that we need to think about accommodating. And then promote a little bit of healthy competition, maybe, between high schools. Implementation and adoption is probably, that's where the growing pains happen. Who can get it done first, right? I'm just kind of thinking out loud here, but I would really like to acknowledge that the high schools is where the board can have the most positive impact. However, the challenge is probably the implementation. It's kind of the vibe that I'm getting from the call today. So just kind of throwing it out there, hoping to maybe contribute ways forward as we as people, aware of the damages that cell phones are doing in the classes, can, preserve some momentum. Thanks again for taking my comment.
Yeah, thanks so much, Will. Okay, let's try Carol again.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So I guess I'm just wondering, we're encouraging students to not even bring their phone to school. What prevents students from saying, I don't have my phone, but it's in their backpack? I guess I feel like there's already rules in place, and kids who are going to follow the rules are going to follow the rules and not use their phones. Kids who are going to break the rules are going to put their phone in the bottom of their backpack and have it all day anyways. So I guess I just feel like there's already a policy in place that we're not enforcing or having consequences on. And it seems like we're going through a whole lot of effort and cost and staff resources to create a new system that will be fairly easy to circumvent. That's all.
Thanks, Carol. This issue has come up in other meetings and conversations. The students are going to have a second phone. They're just going to bury it in their bag, and all that could be true. It's not far-fetched at all. I think the point is that as soon as that extra phone or that hidden phone comes out or becomes a disruption, now we have, a of conversation about why and consequences, right? And that's where the whole discussion around what the consequences are and what the progressive discipline pattern should look like in these cases is also so important to build into the rules, because you're right. I mean, this all comes down to the implementation, how we structure it and how we carry it out, and then how we follow through. And it's like every other thing we do, where if there isn't follow through, it's really not accomplishing a lot. So I think your point
But
is
isn't there already a plan for if the phone comes out, it's violating the rules and an opportunity to address it? I guess I'm just not sure how it's different. There's already a rule that you can't have your phone out in class.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not being enforced.
Part of the goal here is to not have it be class by class, but to have this be, basically at the door of the school. I'm going to go to, did you just put your hand down? Remember, Lena? Are you still there?
Yeah, I was just going to say what you said, which is beyond having the phones away during class time, they're meant to be away during passing time between classes, at lunch, within the school cafeteria. So that is the idea behind this revised policy.
Thank you. So we are coming up on 7:10. So I think I want to go ahead and wrap this up, but I do want to say that there will be, and that there's a whole schedule on our website, but there are further engagement sessions if people didn't get enough tonight and would like to take part in another one. And we will also be putting out a survey in about another week, and that will go to both staff and students and families. So if folks want to weigh in through the survey, we welcome that. And I'm sure that the board is also happy to hear from people, as am I, if you have things you want us to hear about with regard to your ideas on the policy, the rules, any of it. So the more engagement and input, the better. Anybody on the board want to say anything else in closing? Dr. Opperman?
I want to thank everybody. Even if there are comments that are posing potential walls that we can't seem to be able to go around, the idea is to know what those problems are and to face them and work them through. I will say that in conversations with students, I don't hear that they don't think that the phones could be put away. It's just how to make it manageable and how to make sure that people are held accountable. Interestingly enough, in a conversation with some Portland High School students, I asked, does their phone ever ring while they're in class? And it buzzes, and if it's in their pocket. And that's a distraction, even if it doesn't bother anyone else. They wonder if they need to answer it or not. So there's an anxiety situation. Sometimes that's their parent during the day that's just touching base quickly, but it's because of the timing, it creates an anxiety. The other situation, which I know of a student who's in study hall who decides to contact a friend who happens to be in class. And so there are situations that come up that the teachers have to face. And that, as a teacher, however to minimize that is, I think, important to the support of teachers, the morale of teachers, and the learning going on in the classroom. So anyone who's not spoken up in this, please don't hesitate to contact us by email, pro or negative, so that we hear and the problems and we can work them out. There will always be more problems, but we need to work them out. Thank you.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you everybody for your time. Really appreciate the engagement and the input at the end of everybody's workday, and look forward to further engaging with people as this conversation evolves. So thank you all and have a good evening.